All right, it looks like we are right at noon, so we are going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for dialing in this afternoon to join us for our session on demystifying editorial decisions. I am excited to welcome Dr. Harry Shirley from Nature. He is the editorial development manager, and he's going to be speaking with us a little bit today. And I would like to quickly mention before we get started that this is part of the Nature Master Classes subscription that U of L has purchased. So all staff, faculty, and students have free access to the Nature Masterclass on-demand training platform, which offers courses on everything throughout the research life cycle. And I will put some links in the chat. So if you are not registered on that platform and you would like to take a course, you can do so. And with that, Dr. Shirley, welcome. And quickly, before I forget, if you have any questions throughout Dr. Shirley's presentation, if you could please post those in the chat, and then we will get to those at the end of the session. So with that, Dr. Shirley, welcome.
Thank you very much, Christy, for the introduction, and welcome everybody to our short session today, Demystifying Editorial Decisions, where we're going to be looking at how key decisions are made during the editorial processes that occur when you submit and hopefully publish a manuscript with a publisher such as Springer, Nature, or even the Nature portfolio. But before I go into any more detail, please allow me to introduce myself in a little bit more detail, where my name is Harry, and as I say, it's great to be here with all of you today. My background is actually chemistry, so I have a PhD in chemistry from Queen Mary University of London, and then I took up research positions both in New Zealand and at the University of Oxford. But as you can tell, I'm no longer a chemist. I left academia now around 6 years ago and almost immediately joined Nature Masterclasses. So now I've delivered hundreds of training workshops all around the world with lots of different institutions and companies such as NASA, Google, AstraZeneca, and even done short sessions at Harvard University. So during my time as working as a trainer, I think I have a good idea as to the needs and aspirations of many researchers, and hopefully today's session is going to help you have a good understanding and build up your confidence in submitting and understanding and navigating editorial processes. Some of you may have heard of Springer Nature before. We are a massive publisher. In fact, we have more than 3,000 journals. You may have heard of course, the Nature portfolio before, but you also may have heard of Springer, who publish academic journals, and BMC, the largest open access publisher. We've also been around for a very long time, and I hope that helps us understand researchers' needs. Now, as Christy has already highlighted to you, you do have access to our brilliant online courses available on Nature Masterclasses on demand. Now, I do encourage you to please sign up to these courses if you haven't done so already. These are going to be really helpful in tackling lots of challenges within your research career. So check out our online courses. It's easy to sign up. You can simply sign up following these instructions here, making sure that you select your institution, and you will see your institution's access method and relevant details there as well. And then you need to register your Springer Nature account once you've done that. So the Nature Masterclasses on demand uses Springer Nature's unified login system. So it should only take a couple of minutes to complete these quick steps before you have access to our online courses. You may also want to update your Nature Masterclasses profile, agree to the privacy policy, agree to the terms and conditions, and then select your job title and discipline. And I promise it will not take much longer than a couple of minutes, but then you will have access to, as I say, all of our amazing on-demand courses that are going to help you in various different aspects of your career, from writing to grant writing to effectively communicating your work to a variety of different audiences. Now, we have our on-demand courses, but we also have our live workshops, and this is the training that I'm mostly involved in. As I say, I conduct workshops in person and also virtually, and one of our most popular courses on our Nature Masters Masterclasses on Demand portal is publishing a research paper. And that's what we're going to be covering in our short session today. Hopefully by the end of today, you'll feel more confident in being able to submit and navigate through the peer review process. And my aim is to give you some guidance that will help increase your chance of publication, but also the impact you make through publishing your research. So we've got lots to cover today. We're going to be thinking about the journey that a manuscript takes from submission to hopeful acceptance at the end. What will editors be actually looking at during the review process? The importance of that peer review process and how peer reviewers make decisions. But then also finally today, we'll also look at how to respond to those peer reviewers' comments strategically in order to increase your chances of successful publication. So lots to discuss. Let's have a think then about that manuscript journey. Well, it's no short journey. Look at the number of steps we have here, from submission to final acceptance. There are many steps we have to take. And the better you understand each step, the easier it's going to be, and the greater your chances are of eventually being accepted. But before we even submit our paper, there are some considerations I want you to take into account. Have you chosen the right journal? Is your manuscript well aligned with the aims and scope of this journal? Have you written an effective cover letter that explains why your work is important, why the readership of that journal are going to want to read your research? Have you uploaded all of the necessary files? Have you made any necessary ethical statements? So here we want to be sure that we're aware of the journal's policies. These will be easily available on the journal website. The editors may want you to provide data availability statements. Again, check the journal policies to see what you're expected to do. Read all editorial policies before you submit. There may be expectations that you're not fully aware of, especially those related to AI. Making sure we are carefully submitting our manuscript, because that's going to influence editorial decisions. There will often be pre-review checks, and sometimes a manuscript may be sent back to the authors if certain things are missing. So we want all files to be complete. We want the manuscript to be properly formatted. We want it to be compliant with editorial policies. The language, of course, also needs to be understandable and clear. The editor needs to understand what you actually achieved. They may also do a quick plagiarism check, and eventually the manuscript may be sent to the chief editor. We haven't even got started yet. What will happen next is that the editors will look in a desk review. They quickly review the paper. There are two major decisions here. Firstly, it could be a minor revision. They may immediately ask you to make small changes. The second option, they may reject it straight away. This is your first major hurdle. You want to make a good impression to the journal editor at this point. But who are these journal editors in a way? Well, most journals have academic editors. These are researchers who are full-time faculty at a university. They're often a professor. They will have research duties. They may do tutoring. They may design lots of different courses within a university. What I'm trying to say is they're very busy people. But some journals may have what we call professional editors. These are full-time employees at a publisher. Most of the editors within the Nature portfolio, for example, are professional editors. These editors are assessing whether your paper is suitable for their journal and whether it's suitable enough to be considered for peer review. So you want to be assessing the suitability of your paper for the journal. One thing I strongly recommend is making sure you carefully read the aims and scope of the journal. Is that scope appropriately aligned with your manuscript? If it's not, you want to be considering another journal. Don't want to waste our time on a submission where the journal's not relevant. We of course want our manuscript to be interesting to the readership. The editor's more likely to want to publish work that they know their readers are going to enjoy or find useful. So consider the readership of the journal as well. So, if your paper is an original contribution, it's suitable for the journal, and there's sufficient data to support your claims, then the editor may send your manuscript out to peer review. What if it is in scope, but it lacks sufficient data? Well, in that case, the editor may send it back to the authors for a minor revision before peer review. They may ask you to provide more data, more evidence, in order to justify your conclusions. What else are the editors evaluating during desk review? Many editors will want to read the entire paper thoroughly. They want to assess the context. They want to understand the novelty of your research within the field, within research that's already been published. But they'll also do fact-checking. They will assess whether the knowledge gaps that you are proposing, the limitations that you're highlighting, are actually verified against the published literature. So when assessing the context for your study, they want to see that you're addressing an important research question, one that's useful for the field. Or they may want to see that you're designing a new technique that could be useful for the field or beyond, or perhaps highlighting a new perspective, a new way of looking at things. They're going to be analysing and thinking about what impact your work actually has for the field and therefore the readership. Is this study of broad interest outside of this research field, or is it a very niche area of research? These are the things that they will be asking. Let's have a quote now from this senior editor of Nature. So, at Nature, we're looking for wide-scope advances that are relevant to fields beyond the immediate field of research of the paper. For example, it might be the results are especially surprising, or it might be that the work is overcoming a specific bottleneck in a field that allows it to move forwards. The work could also be a really important resource that can be used by different types of researchers to advance in their work. Or it might be something that's more of a conceptual advance, changing the way we think. So there we go, something to consider. What's the editor going to think of your work? We also want to be assessing the work that we're submitting for impact. How impactful is your work, and is that well aligned with the selectivity of the journal? So only recently I was talking to researchers who said that they identified a new protein involved in blood clotting. They said to me, "Harry, we're going to submit this to Nature." I was very impressed, but then I asked them some questions. Does this protein tell us anything new about blood clotting? They said no. Then I said, are mutations in this protein involved in any diseases? They said no. So I said, can this protein be used for any blood-related treatments? No. I could deduce from these three questions that their work wasn't especially high impact. So it's unlikely that this work would belong in a very selective journal like Nature. Editors will be assessing the quality of your study, not just its novelty. How robust is the methodology? Is there good, sufficient data to support the claims? And as we've said already, is this within the scope of the journal? If that's all true, then your paper will likely be sent out to peer review. Remember that editors want to make a good impression with reviewers. They don't want to be sending reviewers really poor quality papers. They want to be making a good impression within research communities. They want reviewers to want to work with them. So if a manuscript has key problems, big issues, is of low quality, then the journal's reputation could suffer. So you need to be considering, what's the editor going to think of my work? And what impression is my work going to potentially make for the journal? So let's have a think about that important peer review process, and hopefully you do make it to this stage in your submission. If you do correctly align your manuscript with the scope of the journal and your works of suitable quality, you should be able to get to this stage relatively easily. But how do we feel about peer review in our audience today? Do we feel positive about the peer review process? Have you had negative experiences? I'm sure many of you would have had negative experiences. I often show this illustration here showing this researcher running down the road to having their paper accepted. But it's no easy journey. We can see along this path we have these researchers holding weapons. These are the peer reviewers. Are they looking to help the author or stand in their way? Well, in this illustration, they're looking to stand in this poor author's way. And this is how many of us may feel about the peer review process. It can certainly be quite challenging. We can feel that we're being attacked sometimes by other people's comments. But the peer review process should really be seen as a constructive opportunity for you to gain feedback from experts in the field. This is an opportunity for you to increase the clarity, quality, readability of your paper and study. So we can improve our manuscript so it ensures we have a high quality paper. We can build foundation for future research by ensuring results are valid and trustworthy. We can really increase the integrity of our own research. Okay. What kinds of peer review are there? Have a think for a moment. Which ones do you prefer? Well, we have single blind peer review. This is where only the reviewers are anonymous. In other words, the reviewers will know who you are, your identity. What do you think are some of the positives and negatives about this type of peer review? Well, the pros are the review may be more honest. The cons is a potential bias against you because of where you work, who you are, your reputation, etc. And that's why we have double-blind peer review. This is where the reviewers and the authors are both anonymous. The pros are clear. This may help reduce biases. Think about this. If the reviewers' identities are no longer hidden, they're going to be really careful about what they say, what criticisms they have. But also the cons, this could be challenging to be fully anonymous, to hide everybody's identity. But we also have transparent peer review. This is where, of course, everybody's identity is known. We have the authors and the peer reviewers' identities fully transparent. This can improve accountability, but it may also increase author-reviewer conflict because we know everybody's identity now. What are some of the problems if the right reviewers are not chosen for the paper? What do we think? Well, of course, it's really important that the reviewers have the relevant expertise in order to evaluate that paper appropriately. This is an interesting quote from a chief editor of Nature Cancer. Identifying the most appropriate reviewers for a paper is probably the most essential aspect of an editor's job. Because a badly chosen paper panel of referees can literally make or break a paper, can lead to a bad paper being published, or even the best paper to fail in peer review. Indeed, this is an editor's key responsibility in their job. We need to find good reviewers who have subject and technical expertise, who are fair and constructive. We also need to be mindful of conflicts of interest because we need an unbiased peer review. We need peer reviewers who can really pay attention to the small details, but also understand the broad picture. where does this paper, where does this study fit within the field? What's the level of novelty, for example? But also, of course, it's really useful that a peer reviewer will be familiar with journal standards. How do we actually find peer reviewers? Well, there are reviewer databases. We can also track previous publications, who's published in research similar in the past. But also editors may talk to researchers at conferences or even lab visits. We want really a diverse range of opinions from a variety of different peer reviewers. We want peer reviewers to be high quality and reliable. What will reviewers actually be looking for? Well, they'll be looking for major flaws. Is there anything in this paper that should prohibit it being published at all? Are the findings new? Are these findings going to be interesting for the field? Is the methodology they've used a valid approach? And is this going to be reproducible? Have they been thorough and transparent? Are the data high quality and trustworthy? Importantly, are the conclusions supported by the evidence provided? Are the various different sections of the manuscript appropriate? Is there anything controversial here? Anything concerning? Are there any aspects of the study that should be reviewed by someone with different expertise? Sometimes a peer reviewer might not feel confident in reviewing certain parts of the manuscript. But of course, after the peer review process, there will be key decisions made about your paper. Unfortunately, from time to time, all researchers face rejection. And it doesn't feel good. Raise your hand in the audience if you've faced a rejection in the past. Yes, I can see lots of you have faced rejection in the past. Doesn't feel good. Let's have a think about how these decisions are actually made, though. So imagine you are a journal editor. You've received 3 reports. 2 say accept with revisions. 1 says reject. What would you decide? Accept or reject? Please put your answer into the chat box. What would you do? Accept or reject? Okay, some suggestions coming in. Lots of you saying accept. But Carly has written, would it depend on who said accept versus reject? Well, that could potentially come into it. But Irina's written, read them and evaluate then. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Of course, the question is, what did they say? It's like a judge in a courtroom, right? We have different lawyers, and the lawyers are weighing up different arguments. It's not about whether they are with or against, the person being prosecuted. It's what they say. What are their arguments? What evidence is there? So we don't know whether they would accept or reject because they're not counting votes. They're a judge in the courtroom, right? They're weighing up different arguments. And think about this. What arguments carry more weight? Well, of course, thorough arguments in a courtroom are going to be very persuasive, objective, scientific data that is unbiased. Objective goes a real long way. The more evidence, the better, right? Weak claims, biased claims, of course, carry much less weight. So it depends what the peer reviewers are saying. There's no one way that an editor would go about this. Of course, the editor wants one thing. They want to be fair. They want to publish good science in their journal. And they don't want to be publishing bad science. Okay, and they'll make that assessment based upon peer reviewers. As some of you have highlighted, they may ask for extra peer reviewers from time to time if they want that extra person to provide insight. So let's have a think in more detail about how these decisions are being made. Where are journal editors actually located? Well, for Nature Immunology, for example, here we have lots of the editors in either New York or London. So that's an example where lots of them are actually based in the same office. So for those types of scenario, we may see the editors, the chief editor, the associate editors, etc., have meetings weekly, and they'll be discussing manuscripts. They'll be discussing your manuscript and your peer review reports during these types of meeting. But some journals are very different. Some journals are very much international, as we can see here for Journal of Clinical Oncology. USA, UK, Colombia, Belgium, Australia, France, Japan. Of course, it's unlikely that these people will be meeting in person very often. So they'll often be communicating via email or even an online submission platform, depending upon the publisher. Let's have another quote, this time from an editor at Nature. At Nature, we have typically 3 or 4 editors on each paper. So no one editor makes a decision on any paper. It's always backed up with a number of other editors. So almost like as a sanity check to make sure everything's as it should be. And again, editors want to be fair. Other additional insights that can definitely influence a final decisions are related to perhaps methodological or technical concerns, whether there are fundamental flaws in the paper that outweigh the positive comments that a reviewer would have made. Sometimes the comments are weighed against the reviewer's expertise. So as one or two of you have highlighted in the chat, does it matter which reviewer said which comment? Well, yeah. So if one reviewer has the Nobel Prize for a certain topic and they're reviewing this manuscript on that exact same topic, does their argument carry more weight than a first-year postdoctoral researcher who's also peer reviewing? Probably, yeah. So again, that comes into consideration. So after the peer review process, there's 4 major outcomes. Accept without any changes at all. That rarely happens. I've never known that to be the case. There may be major revisions, unfortunately. You may be asked to conduct more experiments, include more data. Very commonly, there'll be minor revisions. You'll have to be making small changes to the manuscript, changing how certain sentences read, adding citations. But unfortunately, you may face rejection as well if there are fundamental flaws to your paper, or it's found out later on, actually, this paper is out of scope. Let's have a think about how those editorial decisions are actually communicated with authors. Well, here is an example of a decision letter here. Dear Professor Hugh, your manuscript entitled Modelling of the Risks of Climate Change for Marine Fishes has now been reviewed, and the reviewer comments are appended below. You'll see that while they find your work of interest, they have raised points that need to be addressed by some minor revisions before your article can be considered for publication. We therefore invite you to revise and resubmit your manuscript, taking into account the points raised. At the same time, we ask you to ensure your manuscript complies with our format requirements, explained in full. Please note that one reviewer has questioned the relevance of the data provided in Figure 4 and has suggested this figure is removed. We disagree with this comment and believe the data has merit in supporting your overall argument. However, to better integrate the contents of this figure in your manuscript, we suggest that you make more time to discuss the implications and relevance of these findings in the discussion section. Please use the following link to submit a revised paper and a point-by-point response to any issues raised by our referees and editors. Our guide to writing a response to reviewers' comments provides advice for maximizing its effectiveness. We hope to receive your revised paper within 4 weeks. If you cannot send it within this time, please let us know and we can close your file. In this event, we will still be happy to reconsider your paper at a later date, etc. They will then provide the reviewer's comments as part of the decision. So hopefully the instructions here were quite clear. The editor wants you to make minor revisions and resubmit. Have you got a good chance of being accepted in this journal? Absolutely. But what if you were not sure how to proceed? What would you do if you didn't know what the editor was trying to tell you to do? In that response, I would reach out to the journal editor. Here's some advice from the senior editor at Nature. What I always encourage you to do as an author under these conditions is to engage with the editor. That's what we're here for. Send us an email saying, can we have a discussion about the manuscript? What can we do to get the manuscript over the line? Always reach out to the journal editor. But what should you do if you're rejected altogether? How will you feel in that point? Well, it's understandable. It's likely you'll be upset. This is your work. You've maybe spent years working on this study. Try not to take it personally. It does happen to everybody. It's part of being a researcher, is having to tackle the ups and downs of getting published. Try and use this as a learning experience. Really take on board the feedback from the editor and the peer reviewers. And I would recommend documenting and keeping all of those reports and communications from the editor. So for the next submission, you can kind of be sure that you are including all of that feedback. And over time, believe me, you will become better and more confident in submitting manuscripts. And over time, you will increase your chances of acceptance because you know what editors and peer reviewers want. That takes years to develop that expertise. I encourage you not to take this as a personal rejection, says the chief editor of Nature Catalysis, but as a moment to go back to your experiments, to work, re-elaborate what you have produced so far, and use this as the basis to produce something that is even more interesting and sound. So yeah, let's be positive with this rejection. What would you do if rejected? What would your next step be? Would you just give up altogether, go home, go down the bar? I've had it with research. I'll let you go to the bar if that's what you want to do, but what are we going to do after that, perhaps? You want to revise and resubmit as a new submission to the same journal. Could be an option. Perhaps we want to revise and submit to another journal. Both are fine. It's up to you. Consider some possibilities. If it's what we call a soft rejection, I would recommend revising and resubmitting it as a new submission to the same journal. So if the editor hasn't been entirely negative about your paper, they've actually perhaps suggested you work on a new submission after making major changes, this could work. If you feel that your work is genuinely suitable for that journal, fully revise the manuscript and explain in the cover letter exactly what changes you've made when you submit it another time. But if the editor is clearly not interested, you may want to consider another journal. You may want to explore journal transfer options within the same publisher, so the editor may have suggested backup journals for you. Take their advice. They know the publishing world. They know where your work maybe belongs. Do use this as an opportunity to revise your manuscript, and of course, if you are submitting to another journal, do make sure that you update the formatting to be relevant for that journal. So many publishers have journal transfer options. So for example, at Nature, if you submitted to Nature that you were rejected, but the editor actually thought, this manuscript's good, I think it could belong in Nature Cancer, they may give you the opportunity to transfer your manuscript, perhaps alongside with your peer reviewers' comments, to Nature Cancer or Nature Communications. We have various different transfer options available for researchers. Really, that's there to help save you time. It makes the submission process a lot more efficient and quicker. One of your key tasks in navigating the peer review process is taking on board what the reviewers are trying to tell you to do, and then responding to their comments in a way that's strategic. We want to do this in a way that increases our chances of publication. But where do we get started? How do we address all of these peer reviewers' comments? Well, this is a nice quote from the editorial director of Nature Communications. First thing to do when you've received a report from a review is to read again the decision letter from the editor. Often an editor will point out which experiment is required for further consideration of the paper. They may also explain which experiment you can forget because it's not required for your paper. Let's think about this strategically. Firstly, reflect on the feedback from the editor and reviewers. Spend a couple of weeks on this. There's often no rush. See what deadline the editor's given you. Don't try and do this in just one day. Think about this. Discuss this with those in your study, those outside of your study, trusted colleagues, perhaps in other research groups. But next, categorize. Take all of these different comments and put them into similar categories. Perhaps all of the comments related to table 3 go in one part, and we can see these are the changes we need to make to table 3. If you are making major revisions, break them down into manageable tasks and then think about what steps you're going to take to go about addressing them and how much time you need to do that. How are you going to be addressing technical feedback? For example, how the main text reads, what you're going to include in the main text versus the supporting information. Then we're going to go ahead and make those revisions, add the changes to your manuscript that you're going to highlight to the editor in your letter. So do make sure that you highlight changes to your manuscript. Make sure you track the changes you're making in the manuscript so the editor can see what changes you've made. Create a list of actions for completing major revisions so the editor wants to know what you did. But also spread the tasks. Don't try and handle this all by yourself as a single author. Make sure that everybody who is authored on the paper contributes to the revisions. That will help ease the task for yourself. Try not to make the minor edits first. I would make the major edits and then the minor edits afterwards. That means that you know the manuscript's going to be in a final form once you're making those tiny sentence changes. Try and avoid having multiple versions of the manuscript during revision. So don't send it out to 6 different authors, ask them all to change it, then return 6 different versions to you. How's that going to help? You want one single version for everybody to be working on. So perhaps consider a Google Doc for this. Also make sure that all of the authors of the paper do approve the final version. I do recommend addressing every single reviewer's comment. Okay. You also may want to add every point reviewers suggest to the supplementary information to really demonstrate that transparency. So let's have a think about those final decisions then. Hopefully, from time to time, we will be accepted in a journal. How are you going to feel at this point? Well, I hope you feel very proud of yourself. This is no easy task. Anybody who has published knows this. So this is reason to celebrate. Celebrate however you want to. This group have chosen chocolate cake, or perhaps it's coffee and walnut. Whatever cake you like, or whatever you like to do to celebrate, go ahead and do that. But what do we do next? Perhaps we've got a bit of a stomach ache from all of that coffee and walnut cake. Do we just sit back, wait for those citations to start rolling in? Well, no, I really encourage you to be proactive once your paper's published. Promote it. Make sure you're talking about your work proudly at conferences, sharing your work on social media. And even if you feel that your work is potentially newsworthy, do reach out to the press office at your institution and consider if they would be interested in working on a press release with you. Now, international conferences are a great way to network and promote your article at conferences. You may find future collaborators at conferences. You may be able to meet with journal editors and others that you may be interested in working in the future. So yes, conferences really go a long way. I do recommend attending conferences, but also yes, social media. How many of you are promoting your articles online? Raise your hand in the audience if you do promote your work online already. Does anybody promote their work online? Raise your hand if you do. Some hands raised there. Great to see those who are. One question I'm often asked, Harry, does sharing my article on social media actually increase visibility? Yeah. It's actually been shown in this study. They randomly chose 68 articles from Mayo Clinic proceedings. They promoted half of them on social media. They then tracked page views and downloads for 30 days. And those that were promoted had significantly increased page views and downloads. So it seems that sharing work on social media really does have an impact. I'd recommend, in particular, in exploring LinkedIn as a great platform for sharing your research. Well, it's been a great session today, and I hope that's really increased your confidence in navigating the editorial processes towards publishing your research. Now, I did want to leave plenty of time today for questions. So if you have any questions at all, now is your chance to put them into the chat box, and I'll be happy to answer all of your questions. Also, you can follow this QR code here, but it'll take you directly to Nature Masterclass's on-demand registration page. As I do say, I strongly recommend registering for our amazing on-demand courses. So yes, please put any questions at all into the chat box.
It looks like we have a couple of questions. The first one is, why do the editors prefer major revisions while the feedback may be minimal? And then the follow-up question is there a specific number of feedback points to say the editor, I guess, would choose a major or minor revisions are required?
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much for your question. So we'll go one at a time. So the first question was, why do the editors prefer major revisions while the feedback that they give is minimal? It's not that editors prefer major revisions. It's that for some journals, they have to be very selective. So a journal like Nature receives a massive number of submissions every week, and it has to simply reject most of them because they don't reach kind of the high standards for novelty and implications that the journal has set. And because of that, they're unable to provide kind of huge amounts of feedback for every single response. But that's just a highly selective journal like Nature. Most journals will happily provide you with feedback for your rejections. Do make sure that you ask for that from the journal editor. Every journal is different, but as I say, those kind of more mid and lower tier journals are more likely to give you that feedback. The second question is there a specific number of feedback points to say the editor major or minor revisions are required? I'm not completely sure I understand the question. So minor feedback is often related to the way that the research is being communicated. So it may be modifying different graphs and tables or the writing within a manuscript. Major revisions is often related to the study itself. So there's not enough evidence here, or they used this technique and they should have used another technique. So major revisions is often around the quality of the data. Minors often related to the way the data is being communicated. But thank you so much for your questions. Do we have any more questions?
We did get another question come in. What are your thoughts on the impact of AI on the editorial burden and review process?
Oh, thank you so much for the question, Cameron. Well, one thing that editors are especially worried about is the lowering quality of manuscript submissions. We see an increase in paper mills. So a paper mill is an illegitimate organization that will create fake papers and sell them to researchers. Now, generative AI has really enhanced the productivity of paper mills. In other words, they find it a lot easier to create fake papers using generative AI. And that's a real burden for publishers who are having to now detect low quality research that's been generated on using generative AI. So there's a real negative aspect of generative AI, but like all things in the universe, there's a positive and a negative side. The positive side for generative AI is really positive. I think generative AI can help researchers internationally, perhaps in countries that don't have English as a first language, communicate their work more easily. So researchers now have these amazing tools to help them communicate in English. There's huge possibilities for generative AI in terms of the peer review process. So publishers are now exploring ways that they can support peer reviewers using generative AI tools. There's huge possibilities in every direction, but there's also, serious burdens for publishers related to kind of low quality research as well. So watch this space. We'll see how it all changes. But one thing we know for sure is that research and publishing is now going to change forever. Thank you so much, Cameron.
Okay, it looks like the next question is, what is the best way for an editor to catch AI papers? I have friends who are editors and they are all dealing with it.
It's not easy. So many publishers are trying to develop tools to detect AI generated text and images. But to be honest with you, the tools don't work very well. They often generate lots of false positives. So an editor can just read a paper themselves and they may get an impression this feels like generative AI. But that's not really good enough, actually, because they need to be able to prove it. Because we don't want legitimate papers being rejected, do we? So I think the way we're heading is that publishers are going to be more open about the use of generative AI because it's not a bad thing. Generative AI is a great way to increase the clarity of your writing. And editors, publishers have always had to rely on scientists, right? We've always had to trust scientists. For 100 years, scientists have been able to fudge results, make up data. That's always been a possibility. So at the end of the day, we're still having to lean on trusting research communities to submit legitimate work, to act ethically. I think one thing that we should all be thinking about is training. I think institutions, funding agencies, and publishers should all be training researchers in how to use AI effectively and why exactly they should avoid unethical conduct. But thank you, Mark. It's a brilliant question.
And our next question is from Rochelle. She's asking, what is your advice for impact factor in regard to journal selection? Or advice on impact factor in regard to journal selection?
Yeah, it's a great question. Just because a journal has a high impact factor doesn't mean that if you publish in that journal, you're going to create an impact. You need to consider the readership of the journal. Who are you trying to reach exactly? Not all journals are going to be suited for your work, regardless of the impact factor. So the impact factor is just one evaluation criteria you should be considering alongside readership, aims, and scope. The overall quality of the journal through your own reading. Lots of things we should be taking into account. One thing that you can use impact factor for usefully is for selectivity. As a rule of thumb, the higher the impact factor for a journal, the more selective it's likely to be. So you need to be considering, what level of impact does your work represent? How novel is your work? What are the broad implications of your work? And weigh that up against the impact factor of various different journals in your field to gain an understanding of where your paper might belong. But yeah, impact factor doesn't equal quality, but it does correlate very strongly to selectivity, and that's the way you might want to consider using it.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Shannon. She says a recent study noted issues with published work reference list that either don't exist or did not report on the content that was referenced in the body of work. What are the editors doing to address this issue?
Yeah, thank you so much. It certainly is a growing issue. As I said, editors are trying to work on designing tools to help detect hallucinated citations, but we're also looking to encourage authors to gain training in the use of generative AI. And we're offering training ourselves from Nature Masterclasses to help research communities in these various different issues. But of course, we're always relying upon authors themselves being accountable and peer reviewers working effectively. So everybody needs to work together to ensure that these issues are tackled appropriately.
Okay, and our next question is from Carly. She says, where do you draw the line on to the extent to which generative AI should be used to draft papers, final code for manuscripts?
Thank you, Carly. It's not really for me to say. If an author wants to create a whole paper using generative AI, then that's really their choice. Journal policies need to be adhered to. Most journal policies are along the lines of, we don't mind you using generative AI. We just ask you to disclose that you've used generative AI, and we may ask you to disclose where you've used it as well. But if for example, you're a researcher who isn't confident writing in English at all, but you have a really important body of work that's worthy of publication in Nature, and if you've used generative AI to write your paper, but you've also checked the outputs, that you trust that the generative AI has been truthful and accurate, then perhaps that, and you're transparently reporting that you've used generative AI, then perhaps that's an okay situation. It's up to authors. All they should be concerned with is if they're adhering to journal policies. That's really what I would recommend.
Thank you. That was an excellent answer and example. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to put in the chat before we go? Okay, we have another one. I have a social work background, and when I tried to register, the drop-down arrow did not have that discipline as an option. Do you offer advanced courses in this discipline?
Thank you so much. I believe not. I think the Nature Masterclasses online courses are mostly focused on the natural sciences, so chemistry, biology, physics, and related fields. I don't think we touch upon like sociology and humanities as much, but you may want to reach out to Christy after this session, just ask for clarification on that.
Yes, if you would like to, you can reach out to me and I can recommend some courses that I think would still be of benefit to you. All right, do we have any other questions? We have a few more minutes. Okay, it looks like those are all of the questions that we have, Dr. Shirley.
Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. It's been a great session. Thank you for all of your questions and engagement. I hope that's been useful, and I wish you all the best in your future submissions.
Yes, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you, Dr. Shirley, for presenting. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. I love the ending with the LinkedIn sharing. That was really cool to see. I did not know that at all, so that was really cool. And everyone on the call, I will follow up with the link to register for Nature Master classes if you are not registered, and is also with a link to the recording today. So thank you for joining. And thank you, Dr. Shirley.